Hi everyone. Today we are speaking about the topic of 9/11 as it is so important in the history of America. We are the presenters Omar, Andrew, Devin, and Jason. In the topic of 9/11, we are going to speak about subtopics. The subtopics are a brief biography of Osama bin Laden, pre-Islamisms and Maktab al-Khidma, MAC, Al-Qaeda, events leading to 9/11, September 11th, 2001, the war in terrorism, the Patriot Act, the James Dadrog 9/11 Health and Compensation Act of 2010, how has flying changed since 9/11, airport security, the public response. First, Osama bin Laden as a brief biography. Osama bin Laden was born in 1957 or 1958 in Riyadh, the capital city of Saudi Arabia. His father was Muhammad bin Laden, a Yemeni immigrant who became a billionaire due to his construction management in Saudi Arabia. His mother was Hamida al-Attas and was Muhammad's 10th wife. Soon after Osama bin Laden's birth, his father divorced his mother. His mother remarried to another guy. Osama bin Laden lived with his mother and four half siblings. Osama bin Laden raised as a Sunni Muslim and he went to school in Jeddah and he married at a young age and he joined the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood. After his father's death, Osama bin Laden inherited around 25 to 30 million dollars. Second, Pan-Islamisms and Maktab al-Khidma, MAK. In the late 1970s, Osama bin Laden attended college at King Abdul Aziz University, a university in Saudi Arabia, Jeddah. And it is here that he became a follower of the radical pan-Islamist scholar Abdullah Azzam. It is Azzam that thought that all Muslims should rise up in a holy war, also known as jihad, to make Islamic State. It wasn't until 1972 when Soviet troops invaded Afghanistan that bin Laden was able to show that it was possible to put pan-Islamism into practice. He and Azam did this by joining the resistance in Peshawar, which is a city in Pakistan on the border next to Afghanistan. Both Osama bin Laden and Azzam used their connections to gain support for the Afghan rebels known as the Mujahideen, and they encouraged men from all over the Middle East to join. They named their organization Maktab al-Khidma, MAK, and the purpose of Maktab al-Khidma was to recruit migrant soldiers. These soldiers were known as Afghan Arabs. And these soldiers were provided with training and supplies to fight against the Soviet-backed regime. Third topic, Al-Qaeda. By 1988, Bin Laden had split from MAK due to his desire for a more military role and created a new group that was called Al-Qaeda. The new group would be focused on symbolic acts of terrorism and non-military campaigns. Bin Laden felt snubbed after the pro-Western Saudi royal family refused his of Afghan Arabs to guard the border of Saudi Arabia after Iraq invaded Kuwait, and that happened in 1990. Saudi Arabia royal family instead got a help and assistance from the US forces military. And that's due to the Saudi royal family fearing about Bin Laden Islamism's teaching and its impact in Saudi Arabia. Osama bin Laden then continued to speak out against the Saudi government, which led him to be exiled from Saudi Arabia. Because of that, he left Saudi Arabia and went to the more militantly Islamist Sudan. It was here that he planned Al Qaeda's first act of terrorism. The first terrorism of Al Qaeda was actually a bomb that put in a hotel in Yemen. The hotel had some American troops that were on their way to Somalia for a peacekeeping mission. No Americans were dead in that terrorism attack, but two Australian tourists were dead.
Events leading up to 9/11. October 23, 1983, two suicide bombers were killed and 299 French and American soldiers at their bases in Beirut. After 4 months, the USA, along with other nations, withdrew their troops from Lebanon, after being placed there to keep peace. 1988. The Soviet-Russian Union Al-Qaeda was formed by Osama bin Laden and other extremist Muslims. This name means the base. This organization's aim was to provide money and training to support attacks on the enemies from all over the world, later organizing the 9/11 attack. February 1989. Muslim forces called Mujahideen defeated the Russians. Soviet Russia then withdrew its troops from Afghanistan. Soviet Russia and the USA were the two superpowers. They grew confidence in defeating one and thought they could defeat the other. They wanted to force the USA to end its support for Israel and any other involvement in the Middle East. It was then this confidence that led to 9/11. August 2, 1990. Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait and took over its oil wells and ports, then affecting the world's oil supplies. A United Nations force, mainly made up of American forces, restored Kuwait's freedom. Most Arab states supported this, believing Saddam Hussein was a threat to them all. Even Osama bin Laden disliked Saddam but was disgusted when American forces were invited to be based in Saudi Arabia during the war. February 1991. After Saddam's Iraqi forces were forced out of Kuwait, the United Nations imposed strict controls called sanctions on Iraqi trade. The goal was to stop him from buying new weapons. However, these sanctions ended up ruining Iraq's economy. Saddam stayed rich, but thousands of others suffered. Bin Laden, despite hating Saddam, was horrified in finding out that thousands of Iraq children were dying due to sanctions cutting off medical supplies. Osama had pointed out that the UN did nothing like this to Israel, even though they had never obeyed the UN's orders to give back Palestinian land. American ships and planes, including some based in Saudi Arabia, had enforced these sanctions. The 9/11 attacks aimed to make the U.S. withdraw its bases from the Gulf region and end United Nations sanctions on Iraq. 1993. An American force tried to capture a tribal leader who had been responsible for many deaths. This took a turn for the worse and resulted in the death of 19 U.S. soldiers and many more from the people of Somalia. Soon after, the U.S. withdrew its troops from Somalia. Osama bin Laden later claimed that this showed that the USA would end its support for Israel and remove its bases from Saudi Arabia if Al-Qaeda were to hit U.S. cities with massive terrorist attacks. 1994. The Taliban movement was founded in Afghanistan. Consisted of highly committed Muslims, gradually restoring order over large parts of the country. It forced the most strict form of Muslim law and social control ever seen in a modern state. The Taliban allowed Al-Qaeda to operate as they wished in secret bases such as the Tora Bora Mountains. This was also where the 9/11 attacks were planned and where the hijackers were trained. January 1996. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, a Muslim extremist, met with Osama bin Laden at the Al-Qaeda base in Afghanistan. It was his plan to attack U.S. cities by flying hijacked planes. August 1998. Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed agreed to plan the attack in the USA using bombers and planes. 1999. Al-Qaeda agents started to arrive in the U.S. to learn how to fly planes and prepare for their attack. July 2001. Lead hijacker Mohammed Atta traveled from the U.S. to Spain to meet up with his Al-Qaeda contact. After this meeting, he flew back to arrange final details such as purchasing tickets for the flights that were to be hijacked.
On September 11, 2001, nearly 3,000 people were killed and 6,000 were injured. Over $4 trillion had been used to pay for the damages to the property and people affected by 9/11. It took $1.8 million and 9 months to clean up the debris from the 9/11 attacks. Osama bin Laden initially denied connection to the attacks, but later admitted to orchestrating the attacks. I will now walk you through a timeline of that morning. At 7:59, Flight 11 departed from the Boston airport en route to Los Angeles. At 8:14, Flight 175 departed from Boston Airport to Los Angeles. At 8:19, the FBI was notified that Flight 11 had been hijacked. At 8:20, Flight 77 departed from the Washington Airport en route to Los Angeles. At 8:24, the hijackers of Flight 11 accidentally sent a transmission to ground control about the hijacking while trying to reach the passengers. At 8:40, the FFA was alerted of a possible hijacking of Flight 11. At 8:41, Flight 93 departed from the Newark Airport en route to San Francisco. At 8:46, Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower, killing all 92 passengers aboard. At 9:03, Flight 175 crashed into South Tower, killing all 65 passengers aboard. At 9:08, the FFA grounded all flights coming in and out of New York. At 9:24, the FFA alerted that Flight 77 had been hijacked. At 9:37, Flight 77 crashed into the west side of the Pentagon, killing all 59 passengers aboard. At 10:07, Flight 93 crashed into a field in Pennsylvania, killing all 40 passengers aboard after trying to get the plane back.
The government's reaction to 9/11. On October 7, 2001, the United States starts the War on Terrorism. October 26, 2001, President Bush signs the USA Patriot Act into law. November 19, 2001, the Aviation and Transportation Security Act is passed. Congress passes the Homeland Security Act in November 2002 and the Enhanced Border Security and Visa Reform Act on May 14, 2002. Then eventually war will erupt on March 20th, 2003. Following years after, the James Zidroja 9/11 Health and Compensation Act will pass in 2010. The War on Terrorism. On October 7, 2001, President George W. Bush launched Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. U.S. and British forces began bombing Taliban training camps. 1 month into Operation Enduring Freedom, the first major city of Mazar-e-Sharif was liberated from the Taliban. On April 15, 2002, Osama bin Laden appears on a videotape to take credit for the September 11th terrorist attacks. March 20, 2003, the United States begins bombing Iraq for helping al-Qaeda Taliban forces. There were around 138,000 troops deployed in Iraq in 2003. The U.S. captures Saddam Hussein on December 13, 2003 in the war Iraq. On February 27, 2007, a suicide bomber killed 23 people in Afghanistan during a visit by U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney. On May 2, 2011, Osama bin Laden is killed by U.S. Navy SEALs in Abbottabad, Pakistan. October 26, 2014, the U.S. ends the war in Afghanistan after 13 years by President Barack Obama. What is the Patriot Act? The Patriot Act allows law enforcement to use surveillance against more crimes of terror. It allows federal agents to follow sophisticated terrorists trained to evade detection. Allows law enforcement to conduct investigation without tipping off terrorists, and allows law enforcement officials to obtain a search warrant anywhere terrorist-related activity has occurred. This also eliminates the statute of limitations for certain terrorist crimes and lengthens the terms for their terroristic crimes.